ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that the truth about the identity of Delilah's baby's father has finally surfaced, and the revelation is sending shockwaves through Port Charles. After days of speculation, quiet suspicions, and whispered theories circulating through the hospital corridors and police station hallways, the confirmation has arrived in a way no one expected. The father of Delilah's child is Nathan. What once seemed like an unlikely possibility has now become an undeniable reality, and the impact of that truth is already beginning to ripple through the lives of everyone connected to the situation. For many residents of Port Charles, the revelation feels almost surreal. Nathan's return to town was already surrounded by mystery and unanswered questions, but no one imagined that his hidden past would suddenly collide with Delilah's tragic story in such a dramatic and personal way. The moment the results confirming Nathan's paternity became known, the atmosphere around him changed instantly. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers began to look at him differently, as though the man standing before them was no longer the same person who had quietly returned months earlier claiming to remember nothing about his lost years. The timeline alone has forced people to reconsider everything they thought they knew. Delilah was 7 months pregnant when she appeared in Port Charles, and Nathan had re-emerged in town almost exactly 7 months earlier. What once seemed like a strange coincidence now appears to be a piece of a much larger puzzle. The realization that Nathan and Delilah must have crossed paths during the mysterious period when Nathan was missing has only deepened the questions about what truly happened during those lost years. Yet the most shocking part of the story is not simply that Nathan is the father. What has stunned Port Charles even more is Nathan's reaction to the revelation. Instead of expressing confusion, regret, or even a sense of responsibility, Nathan has reportedly refused to accept his role as the child's father. His refusal has left many people bewildered and angry. For those who knew Nathan before his disappearance, the idea that he would walk away from his own child seems completely out of character. Nathan was once known as a man guided by loyalty and compassion, someone who would never abandon a person who needed him, especially not his own child. But the man standing in Port Charles now appears colder, more distant, and far more unpredictable than the Nathan people remember. Some believe Nathan's refusal is not simply an act of selfishness, but a sign that something is deeply wrong. His strange behavior since returning to town has already raised concerns. He has struggled with emotional connections that once defined his life, particularly his relationship with Maxie. Instead of reacting with heartbreak or longing, Nathan often appears detached, as if the memories that once shaped him are no longer guiding his choices. Now, with the confirmation that he fathered Delilah's child, his decision to reject that responsibility only intensifies suspicions that the man everyone sees may not be entirely the same Nathan who vanished years ago. Others in Port Charles are beginning to wonder if Nathan's refusal hides a darker truth. Some speculate that he may remember more than he claims and that accepting the child could expose secrets he is desperate to keep buried. If Nathan acknowledges that he is the father, he may also be forced to explain where he was, who he was with, and what he was doing during the years he supposedly cannot remember. That explanation could open doors to a hidden past involving people or organizations far more dangerous than anyone in Port Charles currently realizes. In that sense, rejecting the child may be Nathan's way of protecting himself or protecting others from a truth that could be even more explosive. Meanwhile, the emotional fallout from Nathan's decision is already creating chaos among those closest to the situation. The baby, innocent and unaware of the storm surrounding its existence, has suddenly become the center of a conflict no one anticipated. The idea that Nathan would deny his own child has angered some residents and left others questioning whether the man they are dealing with is truly who he claims to be. For Chase and Brook Lynn, who were among the first people to help Delilah during her crisis, the situation has become even more personal. They cannot ignore the emotional connection they feel toward the child, especially now that the baby's future appears uncertain. What makes the situation even more unsettling is the growing sense that Nathan's refusal may only be the beginning of a much larger upheaval. The revelation of his paternity has forced everyone to reconsider the strange details surrounding his return to Port Charles, the memory loss, the emotional distance, the small but troubling inconsistencies in his stories. Each of those details now seems less like coincidence and more like fragments of a hidden narrative waiting to be uncovered. If Nathan truly has reasons for rejecting his role as a father, those reasons may eventually reveal a truth far more disturbing than anyone expects. As Port Charles struggles to process the shock of Nathan's paternity and his shocking refusal to embrace it, a new and unsettling chapter of this story is beginning to unfold. The revelation has not brought clarity. Instead, it has opened the door to an even deeper mystery. Why would Nathan turn away from his own child? what really happened during the years he cannot remember. And perhaps most disturbing of all, is the man now walking the streets of Port Charles truly Nathan at all, or is he someone shaped by forces that could soon push the entire town into a new and dangerous kind of madness? The shockwaves from the revelation that Nathan is the father of Delilah's baby have barely settled when another unexpected development begins to reshape the entire situation in Port Charles. What started as a tragic medical emergency has slowly evolved into something far more emotional and complicated, especially for Brook Lynn. In the aftermath of Delilah's crisis, as the hospital struggled to stabilize the newborn and the town tried to process the shocking truth about the child's paternity, a new possibility quietly began to emerge, one that no one initially imagined. Brook Lynn, who had been among the first people to help Delilah during her desperate moment, now finds herself standing at the center of a life-changing decision, the possibility of adopting the baby. From the moment Brook Lynn first held the fragile newborn in the hospital, something inside her shifted in a way she could not easily explain. What began as compassion for a helpless infant quickly grew into a powerful emotional connection that surprised even her. Chase noticed it immediately, the way Brook Lynn's voice softened when she spoke to the child. The way her normally confident and outspoken personality seemed to quiet whenever the baby was near. The child represented something more than tragedy. To Brook Lynn, the baby seemed like a life that had somehow been placed directly in her path, as if fate itself had intervened in the most unexpected way. Yet the decision to adopt the child is far from simple. The situation surrounding the baby remains tangled in mystery, especially now that Nathan has refused to accept his role as the father. His rejection has left a vacuum where parental responsibility should have been, and that void has forced others to consider what will happen to the newborn if no one steps forward. For Brook Lynn, the thought of the baby growing up without stability or love is unbearable. However, stepping into the role of a mother would mean transforming her life in ways she never planned. It would mean embracing a future that is both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. What makes the situation even more emotional is the name that Brook Lynn is now considering for the child. In a moment that feels both symbolic and deeply personal, the baby may be given the name Lila. For those who know the history of the Quartermain family, the name carries enormous meaning. It represents legacy, strength, and the enduring love of family that has defined generations. Choosing that name is not simply a sentimental gesture, it is a declaration that the child would not grow up as an abandoned mystery, but as someone connected to a powerful and loving lineage. However, this new direction in the story also brings a fresh wave of shock for Brook Lynn herself. The more she allows herself to imagine the baby as part of her life, the more she begins to realize how profoundly everything could change. Brook Lynn has always been known for her independence and her fierce determination to control her own destiny. Becoming a mother, especially under circumstances this unexpected, would challenge everything she thought she knew about her future. The realization hits her in waves, moments when excitement and fear collide in ways she cannot easily separate. Chase, who has stood beside Brook Lynn through the entire ordeal, finds himself confronting the same emotional crossroads. He can see how deeply Brook Lynn has already connected with the child, and he understands that walking away from the baby may not be something she can truly do. At the same time, he knows that adopting Lila would mean stepping into a responsibility that could change their lives forever. It would transform their relationship, their priorities, and their entire vision of what lies ahead. Meanwhile, the mystery surrounding the baby has not disappeared. Even if Brook Lynn moves forward with adoption, unanswered questions about Delilah's past, Nathan's strange behavior, and the secrets surrounding the pregnancy continue to linger in the background. Some residents of Port Charles are beginning to wonder if the child's future could still be tied to revelations that have yet to surface. The truth about Nathan's lost years and the deeper story behind Delilah's arrival in town may still hold surprises that could reshape everything once again. For Brook Lynn, the possibility of adopting Lila represents both a miracle and a shock she never anticipated. In one moment, she feels the warmth of hope, the idea that she could give this child a loving home and transform a tragic beginning into a new chapter filled with possibility. In the next moment, the weight of the decision leaves her breathless, as if her life has suddenly been pulled onto a path she never planned to walk. And as Port Charles watches this emotional story unfold, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The arrival of this tiny child named Lila may become one of the most powerful turning points not only for Brook Lynn, but for the entire town. The possibility that Chase and Brook Lynn could adopt Delilah's baby is beginning to transform what once looked like a tragic storyline into one of the most emotionally complex journeys unfolding in Port Charles. However, the path toward adoption will not be simple. In fact, the process itself may become long, exhausting, and filled with legal complications, emotional uncertainty, and difficult choices that test both Chase and Brook Lynn in ways they never expected. Even so, it is becoming increasingly clear that the story is moving towards something deeply significant: the chance for Chase and Brook Lynn to raise a daughter of their own. From the moment Brook Lynn first held the baby at the hospital, something changed inside her. It was not a dramatic realization that happened all at once, but rather a quiet shift that slowly grew stronger with each passing moment. For years, Brook Lynn had defined herself through independence, ambition, and a fierce determination to maintain control over her life. She had never truly imagined herself stepping into motherhood, especially not under circumstances as complicated as these. Yet standing beside the hospital bassinet, watching the fragile child sleep, Brook Lynn began to feel a powerful sense of connection that she could not ignore. The baby was innocent, vulnerable, and suddenly alone in the world, and the thought of that child growing up without a loving family began to weigh heavily on Brook Lynn's heart. For Chase, the situation is equally emotional, but layered with practical concerns. As a police officer, he understands that adoption is not a simple gesture of goodwill. It requires investigations, legal clearances, background checks, and the involvement of social services that will scrutinize every aspect of their lives. The legal identity of the baby's parents must be confirmed, potential claims from biological relatives must be addressed, and the court must ultimately determine whether adoption truly serves the child's best interests. These steps can take months, sometimes longer, and every stage of the process brings the possibility of unexpected obstacles. Chase knows this reality, yet he also sees how deeply Brook Lynn is already attached to the child. What makes the situation even more powerful is that Brook Lynn herself appears to be confronting a part of her identity she never fully explored before. For much of her life, Brook Lynn was known for her sharp wit, her stubborn independence, and her ability to protect herself from emotional vulnerability. Now, however, she finds herself drawn toward the idea of motherhood with surprising intensity. The thought of raising this child, of giving her stability, love, and a future, awakens something inside Brook Lynn that even she did not realize existed. It is not simply compassion. It feels more like destiny quietly unfolding in front of her. At the same time, the journey toward adoption is likely to test Brook Lynn's emotional strength. The legal process alone could stretch on for months, and there will be moments when the outcome feels uncertain. Biological relatives could emerge unexpectedly. New revelations about Delilah's past could complicate the case, and Nathan's controversial role as the baby's father could still create additional legal obstacles. Each of these possibilities threatens to derail the fragile hope Brook Lynn is beginning to hold onto. Despite these uncertainties, the story unfolding in Port Charles appears to be guiding Chase and Brook Lynn toward a life-changing transformation. For the first time, Brook Lynn is openly confronting the possibility that she wants to be a mother not someday in a distant future, but now. This realization alone represents a shocking shift in her character, a new emotional direction that few people could have predicted. The confident woman who once avoided vulnerability now finds herself fighting for the chance to nurture and protect a child who desperately needs a family. As the adoption process moves forward, every step will carry emotional weight. There will be paperwork, court hearings, tense waiting periods, and moments when hope feels fragile. Yet beneath all the complications, the story seems to be building towards something profoundly meaningful: the creation of a new family. If Chase and Brook Lynn ultimately succeed in adopting the baby, they will not simply be rescuing a child from uncertainty, they will also be redefining their own future together. And perhaps that is the most surprising twist of all. What began as a tragic encounter in a park, a pregnant stranger collapsing near a bench, may ultimately lead to one of the most beautiful and unexpected changes in Brook Lynn's life. The woman who once guarded her heart so carefully may soon find herself embracing the role of mother with a determination that shocks even her. In doing so, Brook Lynn may prove that sometimes the most unexpected paths are the ones that lead to the most meaningful transformations.